Why do we struggle with discipline? Why is it so hard for us to have a routine or perhaps even be able to do and step into our purpose and our fulfillment? Why is it really hard for us to go to the gym and then all of a sudden we end up not going to the gym and like we're eating snacks instead? This video is ultimately probably going to be one of the most potent videos that will shift your perspective and your consciousness on a high shifting level. It might even change your life. So I'm really excited to get into this video and talking about what exactly and why we are disciplined as a society, as beings. Maybe you are also going through it. Most likely you are because you've pressed on this video. Before we get into the video, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, like, subscribe, put notification bells, and share this with someone who's having a hard time with discipline. Maybe they're open to receive it. Maybe it will really support them. And I also want to share with you, if you feel called to work with your practice and relationship with discipline, or really work with your healing, or maybe you're going through a big transition in your life, highly suggest you applying to my one-on-ones, as well as my plant medicine retreats and trainings as well for light workers, healers, and space holders. I also have some amazing courses that are great to help you on your journey. So let's get into this. This is deep. I wrote some notes, guys, because there's so much I want to share with you. Let's start off with why we struggle with discipline. This question has come up, recently. I've shifted my whole practice, and it's something that always is a sign for me that if I'm struggling with discipline, I'm going through one, a big transition, two, I'm forcing things that don't align, and three, that maybe it's time to just do a little check-in. So we're doing a check-in here together, and I can share with you that I use these tips and I reflect on this every single time this happens to me, and it gets me out of a rut. So the first thing I want to just jump into and talk to you guys is about your relationship with discipline and as a child, as a little kid. So think about when you were younger, when you were little, think about your relationship, your guardian that was with you, your mother, your father, your siblings, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents. I want you to go back and just kind of bring this memory to the forefront of who were the people that were the adults around in your life that made a really big impact on your life. It could be an auntie, it could be an uncle, whoever it is. Right? Now, when we connect with that energy, when we connect with that person, right, and how they disciplined us, and we connect with the word discipline, which basically means an act and ability for us to do something that is of order, right? That is the traditional. Now, I'm going to go into the Latin meaning because I'm all about looking at the meanings and the energies and the spelling of words to understand the frequency of what it means and why our body shrugs when we feel discipline, why our body shrugs when routine comes in. And that is when we look at our younger self. Was discipline a sense of physical, where we would be, slapped, where we would be, punished for discipline? And were there other ways of discipline? Was it yelling? Was it avoiding? Was it ignoring? Was it abandonment? Was it very nurturing? Was it loving? Was there no discipline at all? Maybe your guardians, your parents, your auntie, your uncle, your grandparents, they didn't even care about what you did. You could do whatever you want. You could come home whenever you wanted to, and it didn't matter. So just really write down, what was my relationship? What was discipline? How was I disciplined? Or as a child, at school, how were you disciplined? Did you have a teacher that was very understanding, and then when you went home, you had a completely different dynamic, right? Or maybe you had a teacher that was super hard, and when you went home, it was completely different. Or maybe they were the same. These are all things that really get us to the root of our relationship of why and how we can be disciplined. And it starts with everything I always share with my clients when I do healings, when I do mentorships. I always say, let's look at the root. It's great to say that I didn't go to the gym last week, or I didn't end up eating healthy, or I didn't end up, doing whatever practice, meditation, or whatever it is, but to really change the habit that your whole being and your subconscious is used to going back to at the best of times, worst of times, in the in-between. That is where you're really getting to the deep healing. That's when you're really doing the work. And, the work doesn't have to be hard all the time. Sometimes it is. It can be very inviting when we can understand why. And this is what the biggest goal here is, to understand why. So why did your inner child feel that way being disciplined, right? How did they feel? Did they shrug in? Did they get angry? Did they lash out? Did their voice start to clonk up? Maybe as I'm talking to you, your body is remembering a pattern of what that discipline experience felt like, right? For some people who were physically disciplined, they end up being very sensitive in these areas of the body where they were disciplined. And there's a coding of, if I don't do this, I get this, right? So let's go into that a little bit. If I don't do, I will get, or this will happen to me. Now, when we go back to those memories, this is where we talk about reparenting the self. And if you're really resonating with this whole experience of discipline, and you're understanding, wow, okay, my inner child actually didn't really get explanation of why I was doing something right or wrong or feedback in a healthy way, but rather it was a way that was being lashed out. Rather, it was a way that there was no adult there to explain what I did and how I could have improved. Because a child is such a light being. They are such divinity. They are so loving, and they just want to learn, right? So sometimes when that happens, it blocks them off from learning or opening up information about that specific topic, question, experience. And sometimes it can even bring a child to stop doing something completely. How many times have you tried something and then got feedback about it and then completely shut that habit or that hobby completely? That happens so much to many of us because that experience of discipline makes us feel less of. So anything that feels less of, we do two things. We either hold on to it and say, this is what I am, or we completely reject it and say, I'm not going to be this, and I'm going to show you that I'm completely not that, and go the complete opposite way. So that's usually what happens when we receive and we react from those traumas, is we do one or the other. So if this is something you resonate with, I highly suggest you doing the Phoenix course. It's all an inner child workshop that I've recorded, and it's amazing. It was a live course that I made into a course, and it really goes into these days where we devote time with that little younger self. You bring a picture of your younger self, you put it on the altar, you put it in your space before you step into these videos, and you will completely shift a lot. And if you have the intention is everything. If you have the intention that I want to shift my discipline of self and really bring the relationship with my younger self to healing and really hold that younger self, because again, that younger version should be protected at all costs. I think I wish more people knew that you should really protect that younger self. Whenever we make a decision on anything, that younger being is beside you, even if you're 60, even if you're 40, even if you're 80. Right? And that's the true healing, is understanding that there's no division between your teen self, your younger self, your baby self, and who you are right now. And even the versions of you who've awakened and you've let go of many lives that are completely different. They're all part of you. But we just continue to live another chapter. But we can't continue to live another chapter of discipline and a new relationship of purpose of who we are, and hold a point on that because I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, if we are stuck. If we feel stuck in some way. So go check it out. It's going to help you a lot, and I feel like it will really support you. Now, another reason that I feel like we really struggle with discipline is that we feel that discipline is being controlled, right? This is a really big thing. It's like there's a point of us that we felt maybe you had an abusive relationship. Maybe you had one person that scolded at you. It could be one experience. I feel like people experience capital T trauma is the only way I will resonate with this point. Everyone's gone through trauma. Everyone's gone through lowercase trauma. Like, that's something to experience as well. You don't have to go through a big car accident or go through this big pain, what we would consider big pain, for it to not be trauma, to not be something that shouldn't have happened to your divinity, your being. So discipline is control. Discipline is bringing energy to something constantly. Discipline is devotion. So when we start to understand that the relationship with discipline isn't control, then where have we felt controlled? Through discipline, through devotion. And let's kind of go into that in a space of experiencing of that inner child or whatever version of us that's coming through as we did that practice at the beginning. Let's go back to that relationship. Let's go back to the other third parties involved, the people that were disciplined, the people who witnessed it. Let's bring them all in the space here. Let's just call that energy in and let's work on that together. So when we look at controlled, right? And they are devoted to having you act a certain way. So in turn, they control you through the act of discipline. They tell you what you should do. They tell you what you can and cannot do. And then your divinity, your being that absorbs everything as a child is saying, okay, well, this is who I am. And this is what I have to do. And if I don't do it, then I am not right and I am not correct and I am not an A+ student, right? So we have to shift our relationship with discipline as devotion. So when we can bring energy to something, ask yourself, what is your devotion to self? What is your devotion to a goal and intention you have? I don't like to use goal. I like to use intention because goal means like if you don't make it, then it's right or wrong. And it's a lot of life is gray area. So let's go with intention. What is your intention, right? So when we can look at why we struggle with what we do, it goes into that we think that we are being forced to this, whatever it is. Now, let me tell you something. Your younger self thought that that's what it needed to do and that's what it could have only done. But guess what? You are very powerful. And that younger being can actually walk away from it. It has a choice. But we are programmed in a system to know that a child is considered lower on the spectrum and that they don't have choice, right? But they are a very conscious being and children have a lot to share with us. So if you were to go back to that younger self and say, you have a choice. And if that is something that you want to do in practice, I have 2 inner child healing meditations here that can really support you on the channel. And when you go into that meditation, your intention is to let go of control, let in devotion, and see what comes up for you. Trust me, so much is going to shift for you. So much is going to open up when you understand that discipline is asking you, what is you devoted into this conscious life that you are living in? Everything changes, right? Just think about it. Discipline, devotion. Something shifted. I felt it. I don't know if you felt it. Or maybe you might not be open to it now. That's okay. Maybe you're like, okay, that feels a little, that's okay. With time, you can understand you're reprogramming yourself. And that's really what my biggest intention is for the collective, is to awaken you into a new timeline of yourself, to come to a space of understanding who you are through your own process, through your own devotion, which also brings this other reflection that comes in of why we struggle with discipline, how to step into it, is what are our standards of self, right? So standards of self essentially means of like, what do you expect of self? What are your expectations of yourself? What was expected of you when you were, told to do certain things? When you were told what to do and what not to do as a child and as younger years, and also at work, even in this now year of discipline, like where does that pattern repeat from earlier years? I see this a lot of the times where people end up having bosses that they are their mothers or fathers, because that's the energy they attract, law of attraction, right? When we look at discipline, we look at the standards, that standard of who we are, we believed it. I always like to share with people, the thoughts we have in our mind only are powerful if we decide to believe that that's us, right? If someone walks around the street and they tell you something that's not true, or maybe this has happened to you, they have gossiped about you, that isn't true. When you allow it to attach and say, hey, wait a minute, this is who I am, that frequency shifts your whole standard of self, because now you're lost. Now you're waiting for other people and you're allowing other people to claim and say who you are. When deep in your divinity and who you are so powerful, you actually know who you are. But because there was a trigger here, you've now attached a belief to that trigger, and it's living in the body. It's living in the being, and then we feel unmotivated. We feel like, why should I even try? Because this is who I am. Is it though? So understanding what is the standard of self? What was the standards that were expected of you? And do you actually believe in it? Because most likely if it's repetitive, there's a part of you that feels it's true. And we have to track down and how we shift and improve that and shift into welcoming discipline is we track and we understand, where did that standard start? Where did I believe that about myself? Through a memory, through an experience, through a relationship, through something I was taught. And that stayed with my divinity, that stayed with my consciousness. Let's go one layer deeper on, talking about awakening. I do trust and I do believe that we all go through spiritual awakenings. Now, before I lose you here, what is the spiritual awakening? Essentially what it means, you go through a life change. I want to keep it simple and going into the depths of it. But spiritual awakening means you go through a drastic life change. You go through a change that changes and it domino affects a lot of things in your life. Right? So for example, if someone goes through a divorce, it domino effects to probably changing your living situation and maybe changing a job and maybe changing the way that you see your children. All these things will ripple effect to a spiritual awakening. Spiritual means life awakening. Let's keep it at that. So that means that you just went through a life awakening, a life change. And in doing that, that has shifted everything. Now, one thing I see a lot with people that go through a spiritual awakening or a change in their life, and one of the biggest mistakes that I see as well is that we start to see all the systems that are in the matrix, that are in this world, that are just complete phony and they don't make sense, right? Like maybe you go through a spiritual awakening and you understand that, wait, I can heal myself naturally. And in that, you're like, wait a minute, all the things I was taught about what I had to eat and how I needed to get this and to heal this is completely like not true. Or maybe you understand awakening through the school system and you find out that there's a big shift in the school system or the financial system or the corporate world. How many people have gone through that? And I'm sure some of you are here where you've gone and you've worked for someone and you've noticed, wait a minute, this corporate thing is just not really supporting and feeling good for all people. And there's a reason why so many people are awakening right now and they're stepping away from it because they're understanding that if I'm not appreciated with my gifts, I'm now stepping into my divinity and going where I am. And there's nothing that can lead me to that. Same thing with finances. You know how many people want to leave their 9-to-5 job and work for themselves? It's a lot of people. It's happening right now. Want to leave a more slower life, want to leave a more abundant life. So all these things are awakenings that we get to this point, you've gone through it, you've noticed, wait a minute, all the things that didn't align for me and are not my truth are dissolving and I have no attachment to it. And that's a great, amazing, you feel free, right? But then we get to this point where we're like, and I see this a lot, people that have gone through the plant medicine ceremonies, they've done the healing, they've done all the things, but they're completely disconnected to society. If you're allowing yourself to let go of the matrix and systems, that's great. But where you feel ungrounded in discipline is letting go of your connection to people, beings, right? So this is the biggest thing I see is when we get to a point where we awaken so much, you ask yourself, how can I weave the 5D to the 3D? How can I be aware of my life right now in this time, my physical reality, but still allow my gifts to move through me and to foster them? So I'm not shutting it off and shutting it on, right? Putting a switch on when I want them and when they're off. That's so exhausting. Why can't we just keep them on, right? So discipline here is one of the biggest things where people start to dislike certain things so much where they completely want to avoid all things and everything physical. When we do that, we end up doing all the energy work and then our physical body is not in a space that it can hold that frequency. So we end up being on a hamster wheel and we end up being like brought back and forth to high frequency, to low frequency, to high, because it's like now we're managing energy. We're managing our discipline. We're managing our actions towards things in life, as opposed to actually living and being it and breathing it and being consciously aware of the journey, right? So this is one of my biggest tips I would say is when you're going through a spiritual awakening, ask yourself, how do you integrate this into your life? Okay, don't get addicted so much to come back to the body. You're doing this healing to feel safe in your being, to feel safe in who you are. And if you are just allowing yourself to be up here, you just will never want to be in the discipline, and you reject devotion, right? Devotion doesn't become a thing. It becomes, I just want to get to a state, as opposed to I want to be devoted to living in life, to the awakening itself. You had a spiritual awakening to awaken you to life, to allow you to devote to your life, whatever way that looks like for you. So ask yourself, after my spiritual awakening, how can I devote, how can I act in devotion to my life? Take all the lessons, all the things I've learned, and devote to it deeply. And then we allow ourselves to open up and we start to integrate, which is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people don't feel disciplined, is because we don't actually integrate all the changes in who we've become, right? So then that version of us feels a standstill, feels like things aren't moving, because you have everything you need. All this stuff that you've gone through is still applicable here, and more will be added, layers will be added to that. And that is how you allow yourself to weave and come to the discipline of devotion. So I looked up the Latin meaning because I love looking up meanings of things, and I feel like it just gives us more context of what we're working with, but also more context of the energy of where and why we reject discipline, and we think it's control, and we think that it's negative, and we end up doing routines and then we fly off again. This comes to this word. So I'm going to read this to you. The ability to act as one body and purpose. Your purpose is being written, not act on. So one of the biggest things is the ability to act in the body and in the spirit and in all realms, in your energetic body, in your light body, in your being, and step into the purpose, which is life, living the life that you came here to experience. And when we get lost and we don't integrate our changes of who we've become, we then get confused. What do I act on next? How do I devote myself to this? How do I be in this being, right? So this is not something that is fully written, but yet it is something that is more shown through your energy. I always say that someone can walk into the room and be healing. You know, have you ever met someone of just such high energy and you just hug them, and that is healing on its own, because they've integrated, because they have walked their path and actually are living and doing it. And they're not just addicted to all of the plant medicine and the ceremonies and the healings and all the things, or they're not just like going down YouTube rabbit hole and just reading all the videos and watching all the videos, and it's like, okay, the next one, the next routine. Go out there and be it, do it from your divinity, the way you want to, the way that your soul's asking you to do so. And if we can all do that, we can all be energetically responsible to our actions. And that's really what discipline calls us to. It means devoting to responsibility of self in life. Devoting to responsibility to self in life. That's really what it comes into. That is how we become disciplined, is understanding that when we put more energy to the purpose of who we are and what we want to see flourish, even on the days where we feel like our energy is off, or we get triggered and a shadow comes in, we will again and again meet the spaces of ourselves that is true. And that is the real work. So if you were to ask yourself, what is one thing you could devote every single day? It could be drinking water. It could be going outside for sun. It could be whatever it is. And trust me, there's going to be a day where maybe the sun's not out. Maybe it's raining. Will you still go outside and devote yourself? So it's understanding that, how can I be with it all? And when you can accept that fully, discipline rises, and so do you. And you step into being with life, being aware, accepting that you're here and you're not escaping it anymore, that you don't feel controlled anymore, because that's a choice you've made to devote to these things. There's a choice you've made to show up or not show up. Discipline is choice. It's not control. Discipline's devotion. Discipline is understanding the relationship of your younger self and how free and happy they are, and being able to show up like that even when you're doing the same mundane things or doing something to support you and your being. That is the essence of discipline. So this has been a big shift for me, to understand that bigger picture of Discipline is our responsibility. Discipline is devotion. Discipline is acceptance of life itself. Discipline is understanding that it is putting action to our purpose, which is living itself. And when we unplug from that, we find ourselves lost. So ask yourself, how can you bring more discipline into your life? More devotion, more acceptance, more presence, more state of being. Trust me, a lot is going to shift just by receiving this transmission of why we aren't disciplined and how to be disciplined. And let me know down below which out of these things that I've shared really hit home for you. Maybe it was an example, maybe it was a phrase, maybe it was the Latin meaning of what discipline is. What part of that really resonated with you in this transmission? Let me know down below, and also let me know what you would like to receive more, what you would like to learn more about. And if you feel called to really go deeper into healing your relationship with discipline, I highly suggest you doing the Phoenix course. It's an inner child healing course. It's amazing, and it will really change your life of how to really step into that divinity of the inner child and healing that relationship that was really at the root from the younger years. And your whole boundaries, your whole life is going to shift. You're going to see a lot of patterns change on their own through the subconscious. So you can go and get the course down below. And if you feel called to go deeper with me, you can apply for the plant medicine retreats, the divine dharma, the earth dharma, all the trainings down below, and one-on-ones as well. So don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, like, subscribe, put notification bells, and share this with a friend. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.